breaking free, using the Passover Seder, the Pesach Seder, to bring redemption into our lives. So, before we even get into the minutia of the Seder, let's talk about the following idea. Why is it called a Seder? What does the word Seder mean? Order. When is the most disorderly meal of our year? The Pesach Seder, right? Meals have a certain order. Kiddush, motzi, fish, soup, main, dessert, right? That's it. That's sort of like, when you think of a traditional meal, a festive Shabbos or holiday meal, that's how it goes. That's the chronological order. Kiddush, motzi, fish, soup, main, dessert. Here we're out of whack. We start and we stop. It's a lurching, the whole meal. We start with Kiddush, like every other meal, but then we go into like vegetable dipping, and then we start breaking stuff and hiding stuff, and we stop for a long time to talk, and then we lurch back in, and then we make the motzi, but then we stop and eat green. The whole, it just starts and stops and goes and fits in pieces. It's the most disorderly meal of the year. Why is it called a Seder? Now, the Chidushei Harim is a great rabbi. He was the founder of the dynasty, the Hasidic dynasty, known as the Gerer dynasty. He came from a town in Poland called Gora. Most of the Hasidic dynasties are actually named after the areas they lived. Belz, Vishnitz, Gerer, Satmar. So Satmar, for example, very famous Hungarian Hasidic dynasty. They came from a town in Hungary known as Satmar Nemeti. That's where they came from. That's how they got their name. So the Gerer dynasty, they got their name from where they lived, in Poland, in Gora, Poland. The Chidushei Harim, whose real name was Rabbi Leiby Alter, he was the founder. He was the founder of that dynasty. Now, of course, he's known, like most great recent rabbis, are known by their magnum opus. So the magnum opus that he wrote is called the Chidushei Harim. Therefore, when people say, like, oh, they don't say, I heard this amazing idea from Rabbi Leiby Alter. They say, I heard this amazing idea from the Chidushei Harim. It's very fascinating. People in the Jewish world are named after their works. Like the Chafetz Chaim. We've all heard of the Chafetz Chaim. He was a great rabbi. His real name was Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan. He lived in the late 1800s and early 1900s. He wrote a ton of works. The Mishnah Brura, the Chafetz Chaim, the Shmiras HaLashon. His most famous work was where he put together all of the writings that have been written over the last 2,000 years about the dangers of speaking Lashon Hara, about speaking negative about others, and he put it into a book called Chafetz Chaim to remember the verse in Psalms that says, who is the man, mi ha'esha Chafetz Chaim, who's the man who loves life, oev yom liros tov, he loves days to see good, nitzor Lashon chameira, keep your mouth from speaking bad. So the verse in Psalms says, if you love life, don't talk negatively. Forget the acai berry, right? That's great. And the goji berry, it's awesome. And exfoliating wraps are amazing. But if you really want to live long, you don't need to get anti-aging creams and minerals and berries and all kinds of multi-level marketing scams that are fads, that are blue-green algae, whatever it is. If you want to live long life, what does the psalmist say? What does King David say? Don't talk smack. It's that easy, right? So Nitzor Lashon Chameira. So anyway, he wrote this book, the Chafetz Chaim. Don't talk bad about others. Sorry, I thought you talked jive. No, I'm kidding. But that man became known as the Chafetz Chaim. For all of eternity, he'll be known as the Chafetz Chaim because of this masterpiece that he wrote. That's called Chafetz Chaim, He Who Loves Life. So anyway, the Chidushei Harim says the following idea on the Passover Seder. So that's sort of a little introduction in general, why we call people, and it's a beautiful idea, because what it says is that our actions are really the sum total of who we are by the time we pass. Right? Once we pass, our bodies are no longer around, right? All that's really left is what we did and the imprint, the footprint that we left on the world. So, therefore, we name people by the footprint, by the works that they contributed to the world. So the Chidushei Harim says the following idea on why we call the Passover Seder the order when it's really an incredibly disorderly meal. What are the commandments of the Seder night? So on the Seder night, there's a lot of customs, a lot of biblical things, a lot of rabbinical mitzvot. There's only two biblical mitzvos, two biblical commandments on a regular Passover year. Does anybody know what they are? Eat matzah and tell the story. That's it. That's the entire biblical commandments for the night. Eat matzah and tell the story. This year, when the first Seder is on a Friday night, there are three biblical commandments that we're able to do on the Seder night. And what's the third? Kiddush. Okay? Saying Kiddush on Friday night is a biblical commandment. Interestingly, on a Yom Tiv, on a holiday night, it's not a biblical commandment. So therefore, this year, when the first Seder is on a Friday night, therefore, we actually have the opportunity in the first Seder to fulfill three biblical requirements. Now, by the way, this has got to be one of the easiest biblical commandments for anybody to keep. And if anybody here is not keeping it yet, not making Kiddush every Friday night, I highly recommend it. It's very simple. Here's all you need to do. Grab a glass of wine, which, by the way, your doctor recommends. Okay? So you are ADA, FDA, EPA approved, right? American AMA, whatever it is. You're super approved by all the doctors and the great science. So, pour yourself a glass of wine. Now, of course, there's a whole text to the Kiddush. You say, I don't know the whole text for Kiddush, and it's hard for me to read those little words, yo, ma, she, that's too many words there, right? It's not. All you gotta do to fulfill the biblical commandment is just make a borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Have in mind that you're drinking this wine to sanctify the Shabbos, and just make a borei pri hagafen and have a glass of wine. And that's it. That's all you. Now, of course, you can add extra prayers. It's beautiful. I like to do it. It's nice. But to fulfill the baseline biblical commandment, that's all you need. By the way, if all the mitzvahs were this easy, I would be a super Jew. Okay? This is the easiest mitzvah of all to do. Okay, so this Passover night, we're going to have three mitzvahs: Kiddush, matzah, and telling over the story. Now let's read what Maimonides has to say about the mitzvah of telling over the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Says Maimonides in the Laws of Chametz and Matzah, chapter 7, law number 1. Mitzvahs aseh shel Torah l'saper b'nisim v'niflos shenasu l'avosenu b'Mitzrayim. It is a biblical, positive commandment to tell over the nisim and niflaos, the miracles and the wonders that happened to our forefathers in Egypt, Bilel Chamisha Asar Nisan, on the night of the 15th of Nisan, which is the Seder night. Shenemar, as it says, Zachar es hayom hazeh asher yatzasem miMitzrayim. Remember this day that you came out of Egypt. And the way you remember it is by verbalizing it. Maimonides points out, if you use a little bit of a microscope there on Maimonides, he's saying the mitzvah is to tell over the nisim and niflaot, the miracles and the wonders. Which, of course, there were many, right? Frogs, hail, pestilence. I love pestilence. I just like saying pestilence. It's like a weird word. I don't use it the rest of the year. I only whoop it out right around Pesach time, and I have it in my vernacular for about a month, and then pestilence goes away. That's it. It's gone for the year. Anyway, hail, locusts, darkness. There's a lot of miracles that went on there. Now, we generally think of nature as very orderly, which it is. Nature is pretty orderly. That's how we have science. Science is the study of nature. And the only way you can have any study of nature is because it's orderly. If you do the same thing again and again, it's going to happen the same way. Here, watch. We have a law of gravity. So I throw this up. It's going to come down. And I can do this all day. It's going to happen the exact same every single time. Gregor Mendel, the father of genetics. You put this plant together with this plant, you're going to have the same thing 99.9% of the time, except for a random mutation or whatever it is. So we think of nature as very orderly, and then miracles are like sort of something totally out of the order. The purpose of the Seder is to teach us that no. Those miracles, all the nisim and niflaot, the miracles and wonders that we are commanded to talk about at the Passover Seder, they are very much part of order. God's order for this world. And though it appears chaotic, it's actually been put in place hundreds of years in advance. The whole Exodus story was told to Abraham 400 years before it happened. So while you're going through it, or the people were going through it, everything appeared incredibly chaotic. It actually was totally orderly, woven into the fabric of time from before all time existed. We think of nature as orderly, and then what's miraculous as disorderly or chaos. But the reality is that the chaos is just as orderly as the order. Because in God's world, they all operate on the same operating system. We just don't always see it like that. However, the more we are able to see the chaos as order in our lives, the more we experience redemption, which is what Passover is all about. Passover is about Zman Cheruseinu, the time of our freedom. It's the Chag HaGeulah, the holiday of redemption. If you want to experience redemption in your own personal life, and by the way, that is the goal of the Seder. It's not just to talk about the redemption of those people back then, but rather to bring that redemption into our lives. We need to recognize that the chaos in our life is actually order. A person goes through a difficult situation. God forbid, an illness in them or in their family member. We think your world is falling apart. This wasn't supposed to happen. But it actually was. It's part of the order. It's there for a reason. I may understand it 20 years from now. I may understand it 70 years from now. I may never understand it until I go to heaven and everything becomes crystal clear for me. But there is an order to this chaos. And the more I see my life as order, the more I am personally redeemed from all the distress and anxiety that I go through when I think I'm living my life in chaos. When I think that my world is crashing upon me for no reason, it's isolating. It's overwhelming. Because everything's just, I don't understand why this is happening to me. When I realize that it's actually all part of the order, that this is exactly what was supposed to happen to me, it's redeeming. Okay, now I know this is supposed to happen to me. I'm not sure exactly why, but this is exactly what was meant for me. And now let me go ahead and charge to it. That's redemption. There's a rabbi who came by here. He was in Detroit a few months ago, and I met with him. Incredible human being. He spent years in Southeast Asia doing relief work and all sorts of good work, and then he also spent time in ashrams and meditating and yoga. Then he came back to his Jewish roots, and now he's a rabbi in Israel. And he has this phrase that I want to share with you, that if you can bring that into your life, it will be so redeeming. The phrase is, who would have thunk that this is exactly what I needed right now? I'll give you an example. He was supposed to speak here in Detroit. He had a major speaking event. There were snowstorms in New York, not over here, in New York. Yep, sometimes it only snows in New York, and not over here. We have it better than them. And he decided, okay, I've got this major event in Detroit. I can't miss it. I can't let these people down. So he rented a car, and he started driving out. Now, he's never been in a car accident in his life. So he didn't get insurance. Yeah, it's like $15, $16. The car rental is $30 a day. He's in the middle of driving in Pennsylvania. And it's not like it was snowing over there. He already made his way through the snow. He's driving in Pennsylvania. Something happens. The car skids off the road. The car is totaled. The insurance companies come after him for the whole thing. Really, that's just incredibly crushing. Here you are, you're trying to do the right thing, you're trying to get to your speaking engagement in Detroit that you committed to, and you're driving, all the way there, and then you get in a car accident, and now they're going to charge you who knows what, $20,000 for this rental car? And what does he say? Who would have thought that a car accident in an uninsured rental car is exactly what I needed right now? Certainly not me, right? But evidently it was. That's so crazy. Now what I like about this statement is that it acknowledges that as a human being, you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed. It's not like maybe a simple, okay, it's for the best, it's for the best. It's like, no, it's like you're acknowledging like your bewilderment. Yeah, you can't believe it. But you know what? It's still the reality. Who would have thought that I needed exactly right now to crash an uninsured rental car? Wow. God's amazing. He has such a different plan than I have, you know? He's got such greater wisdom than I. That man is a redeemed man. Because I can tell you that if I was in that situation, I'd still be torn up about it. The more we're able to see order in what appears to be chaos, the more redemption we have in our lives. Because some of the biggest angst in our life is, why me? Why is this happening to me, and why did that happen? And we think it's just chaos. We just got unlucky. But if we can understand that this is exactly what I'm supposed to be going through right now, boom, that's redemption. Is Barbara Pichette here today? Oh, here we go. Thank you. Avi Pichette, Barbara's son. Nice guy, nice gentleman. He got a job with a firm that handles IT. It happened a couple years ago. A very good job. They handle IT for some of the biggest companies out here. Now, Avi's a boy who keeps Shabbos. And he told them, when he started his job, listen, I got to be home before sundown every Friday. I cannot work on Friday afternoons in the winter. In the summer, I can stay till 5, but in the winter, I cannot work late on Friday afternoons. And he told them this when he got his job, and they said fine, and they hired him. But then the training turned out to be on Friday. And that's a whole nother box of apples. So he comes in on the day of the training, and he tells them, like, listen, I can only be here today until, 3:30. And the trainer says, no, you don't understand. This is training. Every single new employee needs to be here and needs to be here for the entire thing. He's like, no, but I worked out with him on my contract. I'm not going to be there on Fridays, late. He says, this is not about your this is training. You need to be here the entire time, or you're liable to lose your job. And obviously says, but I'm not going to be here. Okay, so training goes on. He's looking at his watch nervously. Time comes. It's getting close to Shabbos. He gets up to leave. The guy tells him, like, you leave now, you might lose everything. He says, okay, that's what we do. Jews have lost jobs for Shabbos throughout all the ages. So he leaves. Did they fire him? No, they didn't fire him, but they punished him. How do they punish a guy in IT? I don't know. To me, the IT life is so boring. I can't imagine. You punish them by making them sit in front of a computer and look at ones and zeros all day. Oh no, that's what they do for a living. I'm sorry. No. You punish them by giving them the midnight shift. Right? That's it. Okay, fine. You're doing the midnight shift. It's lonely, it's boring, but okay. It's better than losing your job, right? A few months go by. And then there's this fellow, Bruce. Big black Christian fellow. Comes over to Avi and says to him, your God must love you. Your God's looking out for you. He says, why? He says, everybody who trained in with you, your entire cohort just got fired. They were downsizing. During the recession or whatever it was, they were downsizing. And they basically let go of everybody who trained in with Avi, except for Avi, because Avi was doing the night shift. And it was a smaller staff. They didn't really have the flexibility to just kick out 15 people. True story? True story. My mom is right here. Here we go. First of all, let's give her a round of applause for raising a kid who would sacrifice his job for Shabbos. There we go. looks like chaos. Here's a guy, he's a smart guy, he's a talented guy, he gets a job, he just wants to work and do well for his company. And then he's sacrificing for Shabbos. And what happens? He gets punished with the midnight shift. And you think, this is chaos, this is craziness. But no, it's actually not chaos. It's not craziness. It's exactly orderly. Who would have thought that the midnight shift was exactly what I needed right now? Who would have thought? But evidently it was. God thought so, because that's how it worked out. And there's not necessarily going to be a rosy end to every story. But it's when we start to recognize that even what appears to us as chaos and randomness is order, we are experiencing geula, redemption. Okay. I just want to, before we go to the next point, I was supposed to say this at the beginning, but I didn't, but I had in mind from the beginning. We have here a very, very, very wonderful young lady who's been coming for years, Erin Freed. We all know her, we love to see her here, and unfortunately her uncle, who she was incredibly close with, passed away this past week, and we want to dedicate all the learning that we did today, that it should be the Eloi Nishmaso, for an elevation of his soul. His name was Shabtai ben Shmuel, Steve Schwartz. So our learning today should be a great, great elevation and comfort for his soul in the world to come.
Amen.
Okay, now, let's go with that theme for a moment. We drink 4 cups of wine on Pesach. Why wine? Why wine? So, as Jews we say, why wine? Why shouldn't I wine? No, I'm kidding. There we go. That's not going to put me in the big screen. Okay. Why wine? So wine, someone mouthed me, because it's good. I gotta drink 4 cups of something, it sure better not be milk, you know what I'm saying? Us Jews, we all have random ulcerative issues and colitis issues. If they had us drinking 4 cups of milk, could you imagine what it would be like? Okay. It wouldn't, forget the meat meal, it wouldn't be a good situation at all. I don't know. Okay. Why wine? Wine very much represents the experience of the neshama, and I'll explain. Okay, who here likes grapes? I like grapes. How much do grapes cost? A pound. How much is a pound of grapes? About $1.50?
$4.
$4?
$2.88.
$2.88? Where are you guys shopping? Okay, we gotta talk afterwards. I got a place, it's great. Aldi's. Okay, fine. Anyway, okay. So yeah, we're now preseason, maybe they're a little bit more, $3, $4. Okay. So during the season, you can get them for as much as $1.50 a pound, sometimes even 99 cents a pound, right? So what does 3 pounds of grapes cost? Let's call it $6. Okay, average mid-season, $6 for 3 pounds of grapes. Now, if you turn those grapes into wine, what does a bottle of wine go for? And of course that varies. You got $2 Chuck at Trader Joe's, right? But there are wines, there are places in Napa Valley that are producing wines at $900 a bottle, and they're selling out their entire vintage instantaneously. Like, yes, we're in the wrong business. Every Jew's thinking that. I understand. It's cool. I'm thinking it too. We are in the wrong business. Okay, fine. So let's go move to Napa Valley and make a winery. And why don't we just grow quinoa and sprouts while we're at it? Okay, fine. So there are wines that are selling at $900 a barrel. So you got grapes, $6. Wine, $900. That's because grapes are good and wine is great. How do you get from good to great?
A lot of work.
A lot of work. So let's talk about who here has made wine. Anybody raise your hand if you've made wine in your life? Alrighty, we've got 4 or 5 of us here. Good. Excellent. When you make wine, I actually made wine. It was so terrible, by the way, so absolutely undrinkable that the majority of it was flushed down my basement sink. And for those of us who have made wine, my big advice to people who make wine is please don't push your wine on others, right? There is this thing, people make wine, like, you come over to their house like, oh, you gotta try, I just made this new Pinot. It's amazing, you gotta try it. I know, most homemade wines aren't great, but this is amazing. And then we have to go through this whole song and dance where I drink your wine, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And you're like, yeah, I know, let me give you a whole bottle. You're like, please don't. It's like a form of torture, making people drink your homemade wine. Please. If you want to drink homemade wine, go ahead, make as much as you want. Don't force it on others. Okay. Now, homemade wine. How do you make wine? So the first step of the process, you have all these bunches of grapes, and you put them in a machine. And what the machine does is it crushes the grapes, doesn't pulverize, doesn't smash them. It just crushes them to the point where it breaks open their skin, and the juice starts to seep out. Okay? And it goes through this machine, it also destems it. Okay? So it destems it, and it crushes them just enough that the grapes are now burst open, and the juice is starting to seep out. And that creates a liquid, solid thing called must. And then we put yeast into that must, and we let the must sit for about a week. It's very smelly, very yeasty smell if you do it in your house, and it also attracts a ton of fruit flies. They love this kind of stuff. You put like a cheesecloth across it. And then after a week, you bring it back and you go to the wine press, and now you sort of filter out all the skin and the grapes, and you press it to get as much wine out of it as possible, and then you put it into these big carboils. Carboils are like these big glass, sort of like 5-gallon or 6-gallon jugs. And you let it sit for a month. And then you have to rack it. What does rack it mean? Over the course of the month, there's a lot of sediment that gets to the bottom. Now if you leave the sediment in there, it's going to make your wine taste very acidic. So what you have to do is you have to basically transfer all the wine from one barrel to the other without getting the sediment in. So you put like a tube in just to like above where, let's say here's where the sediment is. You get a tube in just to about over here, and you have it transferred into a lower place because liquids will always flow to a lower place. And you rack out all the wine. And then you store it again, and you got to rack it again, and a few times, and you let it wait for months and months and months. And then finally you have delicious wine, hopefully, if you've made it right. You're able to transform $6 of grapes into $900. And by the way, the grape growers, it's a lot cheaper for them. So it's like they're basically transforming 50 cents worth of grapes into like $900 a bottle or $27 a bottle, whatever it is. That's how you go from good to great. To great. How do you go from good to great? How does your neshama go from good to great? You're good. Everyone here is good. We're all good people, right? Thank God. Your people, the Jewish people, we're all righteous. We're good people. Thank God we really are. But that's good. That's not great necessarily. How do you get to great? Well, here's what happened. God sticks you into some sort of machine, tears away a little bit of the stem, the junk, that you didn't need that anyway. But it also crushes you a little bit. It's not pulverizing you. No, but it's crushing you to the point where it opens you up. And it's almost like your kishka start coming out. And then you sit there and ferment for a while, and then you think you're finally done. But no, it's never like that, right? When it rains, it pours. Just when you think you're done, suddenly you get stuck into the wine press. And boom, they're pressing you and squeezing every ounce out of you. And then you think you're done. But no, you get moved from place to place, being moved from this barrel to that barrel. But that's how you go from good to great. The story of the Jewish people in Egypt is a story of from good to great. The Hebrews, right? The people who came down to Egypt, the family of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they were good people, very good people. The best people in the world at the time. But they were not great yet. They had to go through the experience, the harrowing and painful suffering of the 210 years in Egypt. Slavery, children being thrown in the water, the whips and the lashes of deprivation. in order to come out as this incredible people. Incredible. The Torah describes Egypt as the Kor HaBarzel. A Kor HaBarzel is a smelting pot, an iron smelting pot. Just recently I watched a video that shows you how they make iron. It's amazing. They take these massive stones that have iron ore in them, they crush them down, they use certain magnets to pull certain, the stones have to have a certain percentage of iron in order to get processed. And they basically get superheated. And then these massive, I'm sure you've seen a picture of like this huge bucket pouring, this molten steel. It's fiery, it's brought up to 2,300 degrees, whatever it is, it's boiling hot, it's bubbling steel. And hardened steel, by the way, you have steel and you have hardened steel. Hardened steel is even higher temperatures. Tempered glass is even higher temperatures. Then you get this amazing product that makes the world go round. The Jewish people were there to make the world go round. God had a very, very important plan for them. To be those people that would be the Am Segula, the treasured nation. The nation that God would task with spreading his message to the world. And they were good going into Egypt. But then they went through all this difficulty and they came out as great. Like wine that goes through the same experience. Like how we need to view our lives. Again, this is a similar theme to the previous one. I'm going on the previous theme. The idea of the 4 cups of wine is to remind us, again, that all those challenges that we're going through are there to make us great. We're good already. We're good. But that's not good enough for us. Good is never good enough for us. I hope not. We need to be great. We're here for greatness. We're here for greatness. That's why you're here in this world. And that suffering and that pain that you go through is there to open you up. Yeah. And let out the juice a little bit. Yeah. And then we'll get pressed again after that. Yeah. And we'll get racked from place to place. Yeah. Because that is what makes us great. Let me tell you a story of a man who really, really understands the value of the transition from grape to great. There's a man, I'm going to call him Yitzchak Burnham. That's not his name at all. But he asked me to withhold his name. And I see him every year. He comes to Detroit. He was a businessman, nice guy, had a very successful shoe wholesaling company. Lived in Israel. One day he goes down to the docks in the south of Tel Aviv. They've got like a port by Yaffo over there. And he goes to inspect a new shipment of shoes that were coming in from Spain. He goes down, he opens up the containers, everything seems to be in order, the paperwork is good, the shoes are good, okay, they're going to be sent by truck to his warehouses, and he goes back to his car. He gets into his car, and suddenly, there's this blinding flash, a couple hundred meters up the road. And then a few seconds later, the sound and the shock waves hit. It had been an explosion. It was a bomb, a terrorist bomb. And literally he remembers, like, first he saw the blinding light, and it was like almost like, it was probably milliseconds, but in his mind it was like, it was almost like slow motion, everything slows down. And suddenly, there's this massive explosion. His entire front window, his windshield, is pulverized into millions of little flying daggers. He's thrown clear out of his car. And the next thing he remembers, he wakes up, he's on the road, lying on his back, covered in blood, because basically the windshield had become thousands of little daggers. When he looks around, everything is moving, thank God. And you can see down the road, it's not that way with everybody. Quickly, the medics in Israel, they've got amazing response teams for this. And before you know it, there's thousands of medics descending upon the area. And they come, they cut open his clothing, he's covered in blood. And they bring him to Ishilov Hospital in Tel Aviv. And he's actually, thank God, one of the less wounded people, and they start taking out all the glass and they stitch him up. He still has a big gash on his forehead. A few hours go by, and he's sitting in a huge ward, and in this ward are so many other victims. There's also a lot of victims' family members. Hundreds of family members had come to be with their loved ones. And the family members, look, the hospital gives feeding tubes, and they feed their patients. They don't feed the family members. Family members have been here now 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. Some of them hadn't had breakfast. Some of them, and they're tired, they're weary, but they don't want to leave. God forbid something should happen to their loved one. They should wake up and they're not there. They should, God forbid, not wake up. So what does this man do? Gets on the phone, makes a few phone calls, and soon enough, a truck pulls up, filled with sandwiches, soft drinks, coffee, hot chocolate, just food for these people, for the family members. Baruch says, if I went through this experience, I went through it for a reason. I got to see what I can do to help. He started visiting every single victim. Sometimes only the victims' families, right? Unfortunately. He visited every single victim with the attack that he was in. And for everyone, he said, what can I do for you? And he helped them out. Then he started doing it for other terror attacks. And this is a time there was lots of terror attacks in Israel. He ended up founding an entire organization. It's called Or Simcha. It's still around today. It does enormous good. During the Lebanon War, the caterer who was contracted to feed the Israeli army was not willing to go into Lebanon. He and his men, Hasidic Jews with long payas, they went into Lebanon to feed the soldiers. And CNN is there. And they see these Hasidic dudes pulling up. They couldn't believe it. It was unreal. He took care of people in Sderot. I mean, the stories are amazing. In Sderot, where they're always under rocket fire. He's been there many times to bring supplies. 4 times! 4 times in Sderot, a rocket went off right near him. Yet he doesn't have a single injury since then. And he just does insane. He still has a shoe company. Every year he donates like 1,200 pairs of shoes before Passover. But he's got this amazing organization just spreading goodness all around. Now this man was a good man before the attack. He really was. He was a good man. But he got crushed and pressed and racked, and he came out great. That's wine. That's redemption. The crushing weight that we sometimes feel in our life is not there to crush us, but to make us great. Now, I'm going to give a few quick things. Karpas. Karpas is when we dip the vegetable in the salt water. Fascinatingly, Rabbeinu Manoach, who was a 13th and 14th century commentator from France, he says it's to remind us of the sale of Joseph. When Joseph's brothers sold him, they took his coat and they dipped it in the blood of an animal and said to their father, look, he must have been eaten. So and of course remember, the sale of Joseph is how Joseph got down to Egypt. And then once he was there, the rest of the Jews ended up coming there. The whole beginning of the of the exile of Egypt, of the pain and suffering in Egypt, it all started with the brothers ganging up against Yosef. So when we start the Passover Seder, we're still at Karpas, we're at the beginning of the Seder, and we dip the vegetable in the salt water. Says Rabbeinu Manoach, that's there to remind us of the sale of Joseph. We're about to launch into a long Seder. There's lots of relatives coming. Cantankerous Uncle Harry, right? Nubnik Aunt Phyllis, right? And there's going to be that little kid who thinks he's so entitled and is yelling and screaming and whining, and won't his parent just put him to sleep or something? And there's a lot of possibilities for tensions, anger, and flare-ups. We start with a reminder of the sale of Joseph. Look what happens when there's conflict in the family. Make sure your Seder is free and clear of any of that. Isn't that amazing? Amazing idea. You never knew that? Is that what you said? Yep, there you go. That's my goal. Try to bring you amazing commentators of things you never knew. I'll give you one more thing that you never knew, hopefully. and then I will allow you guys to go about your merry ways and hopefully see you more next week and give you some more ideas. Yachatz. We break the middle matzah in two and we hide the larger half for tzafun, for later. The Chassam Sofer, who was a great scholar, he lived into the, I think he lived into, he lived in the 1800s. I don't know what year he passed away, but he's more recent. He said a beautiful idea. So the Passover Seder is not just about the past redemption. The Passover Seder is a reminder that if God did that for us for Egypt, He's going to do it again for us now. As the Talmud says, "B'Nisin nigalu avoseinu." In the month of Nisan, our forefathers were redeemed. "U'b'Nisan asidin lihigael." And in Nisan, they will be redeemed. Our Passover Seder is never just about looking back, but it's also always about looking forward. And when we break the middle matzah, the bigger half gets hidden away, to remind us that this Seder is really about two redemptions: the past redemption and the future redemption. And which one is bigger? The future redemption. Because our sages tell us that when the final redemption occurs, as it says in Yirmiyah, is it Yeshaya or Yirmiyah? Hold on. In one of the prophet tells us that when the final redemption comes, it will be so great that people will no longer talk about the Mitzrayim, the Egypt miracles, because they'll be small in comparison. They'll be small potatoes. Like, imagine a guy has a storehouse, and in the storehouse he has thousands of tons of pure diamonds, and he also has like a safe with a bunch of copper. No one's like, wow, look at that guy, he's got so much copper. No, he's got so much diamonds. The miracles of the future redemption will be so great that the prophet tells us that after the miracles of the final redemption, people will no longer say, wow, Hashem was so great who took us out of Egypt. We'll say, wow, Hashem was so great who took us out of all the diaspora that the Jews are in currently. So we hide the bigger half, saying the bigger redemption is still hidden. That's what's not here yet, but we know is going to come. We're celebrating the smaller redemption tonight, but we're also super confident that we will experience a greater redemption, and that is the idea behind the yachatz, the splitting of the matzahs and the hiding of the greater matzah. Thank you so much for coming. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you next week.